This is Middle East Matters on France 24. I'm Hala Mohieddin. Coming up in this week's show, Israel lashes out after the UN Security Council orders them to stop building settlements. We take you to the monastery on the outskirts of Mosul, providing refuge for Iraq's displaced Christians. And in Iran, there's a campaign underway to save an Italian-designed villa. We'll tell you more later in the programme. But first, Israeli authorities have described an historic UN resolution on settlement building as shameful. The motion demanding Israel stop building settlements on occupied land was approved after the US abstained rather than use its veto. However, Benjamin Netanyahu has responded with fury, lashing out with financial sanctions and vowing not to respect the motion. Diptyque Laurent has more.
A shock rebuke from the US towards its longtime ally, Israel. For the first time in nearly 40 years, the UN passed a resolution ordering Israel to stop settlement building. This after the US ambassador to the UN, Samantha Power, abstained from voting instead of using the traditional veto.
It is because this forum too often continues to be biased against Israel, because there are important issues that are not sufficiently addressed in this resolution, and because the United States does not agree with every word in this text, that the United States did not vote in favor of the resolution.
In response, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu curbed diplomatic contacts and suspended aid to countries like Senegal, one of the member states who put forward the resolution. The U.S. ambassador to Israel, Jason Hopkins, was also summoned.
We feel betrayal. We are extremely frustrated. We are angry. This is not how you treat friends, your only democratic ally in the Middle East.
Israel's 1967 war against its Arab neighbors proved to be the turning point in the region's conflict. After the war, Israel captured large parts of the region, including the West Bank. A year later, the first wave of settlers arrived, their communities built among Palestinian homes. Through Israel-controlled roads, the settlers can come and go from the mainland at any time. Since coming into power in 2009, Benjamin Netanyahu has continued to accelerate settlement building. In 2009, there were 490,000 Jewish settlers in the West Bank and East Jerusalem. By 2014, this number had risen to nearly 580,000. The UN argues that these settlements are illegal under international humanitarian law. They have called for Israel to return to pre-1967 borders. Otherwise, they say, this would signal the end of a possible two-state solution.
You have to remember that Netanyahu leads a very hardline government, and it's been like this for 15 years. We are really dealing with people here who don't want a Palestinian state. They say it's a done deal, that it will never be possible. They're very clear about this.
Netanyahu has vowed not to respect the UN resolution. Just after it was voted, Israeli parliament approved a draft bill that seeks to legalize dozens of unauthorized Israeli settlements known as outposts. The government has also said it intends to move ahead with the construction of thousands of new homes in East Jerusalem.
Well, elsewhere in the region, Turkey's post-coup crackdown continues apace, while the Syrian civil war rumbles on. Alexander Orkot takes a look back now at the main news stories over the past week.
29 police officers have gone on trial in Turkey in the first hearing related to the failed coup in July. They're charged with disobeying orders to defend President Recep Tayyip Erdogan's palace in Istanbul on the night that the military tried to take power.
We want those associated with Gulen who attempted a coup to be tried in accordance with the heaviest Turkish laws, because this is treason, and the repercussion for that is quite clear.
Erdogan's far-reaching crackdown has drawn widespread criticism from the international community. More than 40,000 suspects have been arrested in connection with the coup during a state of emergency. The national trials are set to be the most far-reaching legal process in Turkish history. Medical staff in the Syrian city of Idlib have been overwhelmed by the influx of wounded people who recently fled Aleppo. At least 34,000 refugees, both civilians and fighters, were allowed to flee as Bashar al-Assad's forces retook the last rebel-held areas in the east. The refugees had spent more than 100 days under constant bombardment, while medical and food supplies ran dry. Thousands arriving in Idlib are suffering from infected shrapnel wounds and malnutrition, while heavy snowfall in the area has brought the risk of hypothermia. After retaking Aleppo, President Assad said his armed forces would continue to march on other rebel-held areas, raising fears that Idlib could be next. In Iraq, children are being taught to unlearn and forget what the Islamic State group has shown them. Many of the pupils in a northern Iraqi camp of 20,000 outside Mosul spent more than 2 years in the IS-controlled city. Jihadist fighters tried to indoctrinate them and forced the children to watch public floggings and beheadings. Some were taught weaponry, demolition and warfare. UNICEF says 35,000 children have fled Mosul since Iraq's military began a massive offensive there 2 months ago.
Well, let's stay in Iraq, where the battle against the Islamic State group continues. The fight to retake Mosul has become entrenched, and with violence raging on, civilians have been fleeing. However, just 30 kilometres outside the city, one monastery has kept its doors open and continues to operate as a refuge despite the dangers.
Atop Mount Al-Faf in northern Iraq is the Marmatai Monastery. Dating back to the 4th century, it's one of the oldest Christian monasteries in existence. It's also just 5 kilometers away from the Islamic State group's positions. The monastery welcomes Christians who are seeking refuge in their religion.
What's the future hidden for us? We are not sure from anything. We should wait and see on the next day what it's hidden for us. We hope it will be better, but most of the people, they are expecting the worst.
Before the US invasion in 2003, there were over 1 million Christians living in Iraq, many of them in Mosul, the second largest city. Today, there is only about 300,000 Christians in the country. This family fled their home in Mosul. They say they'll never go back.
We don't trust our neighbors anymore. It will be impossible to restore that trust again.
The monastery's keeper, Fares, lives here with his disabled mother and 2 sisters. The family fled Mosul 2 years ago after receiving death threats from the jihadists. He too vows to never return again.
No, never.
Even if the Islamic State group is chased out, 80% of people in Mosul support their ideas.
Around 1,000 monks live here, and they say they'll protect their monastery at all costs.
We know all the paths in the mountain. So the only way, if they reach here, is to take the mountain path to the other side, when we'll be on the region of Kurdish people.
And if you will not have enough time to live?
We shall face our fate or our destiny.
Prayers are carried out in 3 languages: Assyrian, Aramaic, believed to be the language spoken by Jesus Christ, and Arabic. Fares, the caretaker, accompanies the visitors on their way out at the end of the day. They're all well aware of the risks of coming to this monastery. Nevertheless, it has become a site of refuge, despite the dangers lurking just kilometers away.
Well, to Iran now, where a construction boom is underway. Major building projects can be found across Tehran, but critics are worried that the country's cultural heritage is at risk. One historically significant villa is now at the centre of this battle between modernisation and defending cultural and historical monuments. Josh Vardy and Mariam Piazzedi report.
This wall hides the last remaining villa in the Middle East, designed by renowned Italian architect Gio Ponti. This 60-year-old building in the Nir Varan district of northern Tehran is now threatened with destruction. A 20-story luxury hotel is planned to spring up in its place. Nearby, a group of Iranian architects are working together to protest these plans.
The villa is a little raised off the ground. The roof is also like that. It's like it's almost floating in the air.
Faria Javahirian says she's visited the famous villa many times over her career.
They could find new uses for this villa. It could be a restaurant or a cafe, depending on the project. Even if they put other buildings on the land, keeping the villa would be the ideal solution for me. The Namazi Villa is the last remaining work by Gio Ponti in the Middle East.
The villa was sold 4 years ago but had already been classed as a historic monument. Now the Iranian Cultural Heritage Office has also joined the fight to save it from destruction. It's trying to buy the land back which the villa stands on, while also criticizing the town planning process.
If you take a look at the architecture in Tehran, which even important government figures criticize, you'll see that we don't have a coherent plan. Urban planners should be preserving and protecting the city's rich cultural heritage.
In recent years, Tehran has witnessed a growing trend of older houses being bought only to be destroyed soon after. Iranian regulation means that only land has value, not the buildings on it. New developments are announced every week, with towers of apartments and shopping centres appearing all over the city.
Those who are building today weren't working in construction 10 or 15 years ago. They're investing their fortunes in construction, but at the moment the real estate market's in recession and it's not doing well. Despite that, every day they build something new because there's no other work. It's the safest investment these days.
According to official figures, between March and April in 2016, Tehran's municipality granted 1,800 building permits, a new record.
And that's it from me and the team. Don't forget to follow us on Facebook and Twitter for all the latest from the Middle East. And we're back with more at the same time next week. Bye for now.